In recent times, I've been influenced by a school of thought in the field of political science known as structural realism or neorealism. Structural realism, as the words imply, takes the approach that international relations or the relationship between nations is not ordered by any single defining concept or ideology, but that nations contest for power and through interstate rivalry define their place in the world. In geopolitical terms, the effective use of that power is vital to the changing prospects of a nation. The same structural analysis can be applied to the internal dynamics of a country like South Africa. And I found this approach useful in thinking about where we are and where we might head in the next 20 years. Although I personally find structural realism a useful organizing framework that cuts through excessive idealism, something that I believe we suffer from, my personal politics are not aligned with it in full. However, in an environment that is tenuous, subject to rumor and misinformation, and often fueled by naive optimism or naive pessimism, I find it a useful stock-taking framework. The rapid change in South Africa, the frequent naivety and absence of analytical or fact-based discussion have led me to gingerly embrace structural realism as a perspective that provides insight and that is of value in reflecting on where we are and our future prospects. I've also recently been influenced by the work of Ferdinand Braudel, a French historian and philosopher. He was probably one of the best-known European historians of the 20th century, a highly productive and eclectic scholar. One of his main ideas concerned the enormous impact of what he called the longue durée, the long march, the long term on contemporary matters. As a historian, he analyzed the profound influence of geography, climate, long-term history on short-term events. As someone said, the future is history waiting for action. History is a great guide to the future because unless leaders or big events intervene, the future is history repeating itself. And I will come back to this theme. Braudel argued that at the surface level, contemporary events often overwhelm our analysis. I suppose we might talk of this in South Africa as the Sunday papers effect. When I read the Sunday papers, it's clear the country is imminently about to collapse. When I look at the long march of history in this country, the deep resilience that some have already referred to is in fact a driving force. We may be over-influenced by the short term, and so we need, as leaders, especially for a future generation, to look beyond the day-to-day events and headlines and consider the broad context in which we're analyzing, thinking, and taking action about the future. If we look beyond the headlines and understand the context in which these stories are communicated, we may have a deeper appreciation of our prospects, both positive and negative. Braudel's argument is that contemporary events are in fact predicated on a deeper level of analysis to understand the patterns, processes, and structures that have got us to where we are today. Of course, he was not alone in this line of thinking. He proposed three categories of phenomena. Oversimplifying them for our purposes, they are contemporary events, processes a mid-level of structural forces, and finally deeper structures that are largely immovable and immutable, and events that will shape our events in the long term. Firstly, contemporary events are those that shape our discussion and action in a very day-to-day manner. Reflections about news, social media, what's on websites, newspapers, television, and radio, we all understand easily what we mean by the short term and the contemporary. The second level of analysis is about the medium or longer term. These are the deeper structures and flows of events that are in force over a longer period of time. They are changing, but their change is invisible, is less visible to the naked eye. They are often the backstory to the current story. In other words, they are what lies behind contemporary events. There are many examples one could give. At an economic level, you could analyze South Africa's economy as having gone from a colonial trading post to a natural resource economy and now to a diversified services economy. At the political level, one could argue that colonization led to a struggle for liberation, which has led to a democratic constitution. At the social level, you could argue that we've gone, even in my lifetime, from letter writing to telephone calls to Facebook. The drivers of these mid-level dynamics require a deep understanding of cause and effect, and an understanding of trigger events such as the chip leading to the internet. They are important, multiple forces that strengthen or weaken a nation. Binedell's argument at the third level is there are a set of unchanging structures that give shape and particular quality to prospects for any nation or region. In his view, these are largely unchangeable phenomena. In South Africa's case, the presence of natural resources from which we built our economy would be one. Our physical location at the bottom of the African continent is another. Our location on sea routes might be a further one. Physical geography and the presence of water and climate would be other long-term, very slow, if at all changing, phenomena. I'm attracted to the Binedellian view as I see it, as I'm sure you do. All three levels are present and actively shaping the debate and the decision-making and the behaviors in South Africa. While Sunday papers may inform us about much, in many ways we are in the grip of a 300-year or 3,000-year history. The long-term struggle to bring about a democratic society has led to a political culture and transformation process that has been informed by the nature of that struggle. This is totally logical and understandable. However, it may be that the intellectual understanding, the ideological framework or set of assumptions that have been formed by the transformation process do not deal adequately with the reality of South Africa's political, economic, or social life, nor the many other forces at work that are currently shaping our nation. Observation of South Africa's current economic performance triggers a question as to whether the outlook of the transformation project and the realities of South Africa's economic, political, and social life are in fact aligned or in tune with the many forces that are at work that are shaping our prospects, forces that may be beyond our control, in which we are rule takers and not rule makers. The transformation process and its history may also contain an important misconception about the linkages or delinkages between the relationship between political parties, the government, the state, and the nation itself. South Africa lived under the hegemony of a political party that saw these as self-evidently true, these linkages, and as one as the same for many, many decades.